Is intermittent fasting silently hurting millions of women? That's the question science is finally starting to ask, and the answers might shock you. While intermittent fasting has skyrocketed in popularity as a revolutionary tool for weight loss, mental clarity, and metabolic health, a growing body of research suggests it may come at a hidden cost, especially for women. At first glance, intermittent fasting seems like a one-size-fits-all solution. Skip breakfast, shrink your eating window, watch the weight melt off and your energy soar. That's the story countless fitness influencers, biohackers, and even some doctors have pushed for years. And for men, it often works. Their testosterone rises. Their insulin sensitivity improves. Their fat melts away while their muscles stay intact. But the story isn't so simple when it comes to women. Behind the scenes, women are experiencing something very different. Menstrual cycles go missing. Hormonal acne flares up. Hair thins. Sleep suffers. Anxiety increases. And sometimes, even fertility takes a hit. The very thing that was supposed to improve their health starts to break it down. Could the same fasting protocols that help men thrive actually be throwing women's hormones into chaos? The truth is, the science we've been fed about intermittent fasting has largely ignored a key detail: female physiology. Most of the landmark studies that launched intermittent fasting into the mainstream were done on men, or male lab animals. Women's unique hormonal rhythms weren't part of the equation. That's a problem. Because estrogen, progesterone, luteinizing hormone, and other critical regulators of female health don't just fluctuate monthly, they respond dramatically to stress. And for the female body, fasting can register as a stressor. A big one. In the next few minutes, we're going to uncover what the research really says about intermittent fasting in women. From overlooked hormonal side effects to shocking studies that rarely make headlines, we'll explore the double standard in fasting science, and why a strategy built for male bodies might be failing female ones. We'll also share real-world stories of women who experienced serious health consequences from popular fasting routines, and we'll dive into what the experts are now recommending to keep fasting safe, if it should be done at all. If you've ever wondered why intermittent fasting works wonders for some people but leaves others feeling worse, this might be the missing piece. Especially if you're a woman. Because when it comes to fasting, the difference between success and burnout could come down to the very thing most protocols ignore: your hormones. Coming up next, we'll break down how intermittent fasting actually works, and why that process plays out very differently in men and women. What is intermittent fasting, really? To understand why intermittent fasting affects men and women differently, we need to start with what intermittent fasting actually is. Despite what diet culture might make it seem, intermittent fasting isn't a diet in the traditional sense. It's not about what you eat, but when you eat. At its core, intermittent fasting is an eating pattern that cycles between periods of eating and periods of voluntary abstinence from food. And it's this deliberate timing, not calorie counting, that has made intermittent fasting one of the most talked about health strategies in recent years. The most popular method is the 16-8 protocol. That means fasting for 16 hours straight, then eating all your meals within an 8-hour window. For many, that simply looks like skipping breakfast and having their first meal at noon, then finishing dinner by 8 p.m. Another widely adopted method is the 5-2 plan, where a person eats normally 5 days of the week and significantly reduces calories, often down to around 500 to 600, on the other 2 days. And then there's OMAD, short for 1 meal a day, where all your calories are consumed in a single sitting, often within a 1-hour window. This approach pushes the boundaries of fasting even further, often drawing praise from hardcore biohackers and minimalists alike. So why has intermittent fasting exploded in popularity? The answer lies in the range of benefits that have been reported, especially by men. Users often claim they've lost weight without restricting what they eat. Many say they experience sharper focus, better sleep, improved digestion, and even enhanced longevity. And science has supported some of these claims. The idea is that when you fast, your body shifts into a different metabolic state. Without food, insulin levels drop. This drop in insulin makes it easier for the body to access stored fat and convert it into energy. Meanwhile, levels of glucagon rise, a hormone that helps break down glycogen in the liver. As fasting continues, the body may also start producing ketones, which can fuel the brain more efficiently than glucose in some cases. This is part of what gives people that so-called fasting clarity. From an evolutionary perspective, intermittent fasting mimics what humans may have experienced throughout history. In the absence of regular meals or supermarkets, our ancestors likely went hours or even days without food. Our bodies are designed to handle those gaps. In men, this often results in elevated human growth hormone, better fat oxidation, and a leaner physique. And so, intermittent fasting was quickly embraced by athletes, entrepreneurs, and anyone looking for an edge in weight loss or mental performance. The benefits were undeniable, or so it seemed. But what most people didn't realize is that the overwhelming majority of early studies supporting intermittent fasting benefits were either done on men or male lab animals. Women weren't part of the research, and their hormonal systems weren't considered. That matters, because fasting impacts the endocrine system, and women's endocrine systems operate very differently than men's. The process of fasting seems simple on the surface, but internally, it sets off a cascade of signals. Lower insulin levels are usually a good thing for weight loss, but in women, that drop can interfere with other critical hormones like estrogen and progesterone. The body begins to prioritize survival, and in doing so, it may start conserving energy, shutting down reproductive functions, or altering thyroid activity. What was designed to burn fat may end up disrupting the very systems that keep women's bodies in hormonal balance. Still, the idea of intermittent fasting as a miracle solution persists. It continues to trend in health circles, weight loss communities, and even among celebrities. But few people ask the most important question of all: how does fasting actually work for women? In the next section, we'll look at why intermittent fasting benefits men so effectively, and why that success might not carry over to women in the same way. Why intermittent fasting works so well for men. When we talk about intermittent fasting benefits, most of the glowing testimonials come from men. They report increased energy, rapid fat loss, sharper focus, and enhanced workouts. And while these results are real, they're not happening by accident. There's a biological reason intermittent fasting works so well for men, and it starts with how male bodies evolved to handle scarcity. Imagine life thousands of years ago, before modern civilization. Food wasn't available 3 times a day. Men were often the hunters, spending long hours or even days searching for game. Going without food was not a choice, it was part of survival. During those fasted periods, the male body needed to stay strong, alert, and ready to act. If it weakened under stress or skipped a beat hormonally, the tribe might not eat. Evolution favored males whose bodies responded to fasting with sharper focus, more energy, and physical resilience. That survival mechanism is still hardwired into male biology today. This evolutionary design shows up clearly in the hormonal response men experience during intermittent fasting. When men fast, testosterone levels often remain stable or even rise. Human growth hormone, or HGH, surges dramatically. This hormone plays a key role in preserving muscle mass and promoting fat breakdown. It's one reason why fasting doesn't seem to cause muscle loss in men the way you might expect during periods without food. In fact, for men, fasting can even enhance physical performance. Their bodies become more efficient at accessing stored fat and using it as energy, while keeping lean tissue intact. One of the most cited studies in this area was published in 2016. It found that men who engaged in intermittent fasting protocols saw an average increase of 14% in their testosterone levels after just a few weeks. Other research shows a notable boost in human growth hormone levels during prolonged fasting periods, sometimes by as much as 1,300% in just 24 hours. These hormonal shifts contribute to faster fat loss, improved metabolic flexibility, and better insulin sensitivity. Essentially, fasting boosts hormones in a way that makes the male body operate more like a fat-burning, muscle-preserving machine. Athletic performance is another area where intermittent fasting appears to give men an edge. Many male athletes report better endurance, mental clarity, and faster recovery times while training in a fasted state. The body becomes more adept at using fat for fuel, reducing dependence on glycogen stores and improving metabolic efficiency. This is especially beneficial in sports that require long-duration output like running, cycling, or martial arts. The combination of elevated growth hormone, stable testosterone, and improved insulin sensitivity creates the perfect hormonal environment for performance and body composition goals. Insulin plays a major role in this equation. When you eat, insulin is released to help your body store and use nutrients, especially glucose. In men, fasting leads to lower baseline insulin levels and improved insulin sensitivity, meaning their cells respond more effectively when insulin is released. This helps reduce the risk of metabolic diseases like type 2 diabetes and allows the body to tap into fat stores more efficiently during fasts. Over time, this can result in noticeable reductions in body fat, particularly around the abdomen, a known risk factor for chronic disease. All of this explains why intermittent fasting has become a cornerstone of the biohacking movement, especially among men. Influencers, entrepreneurs, and fitness experts alike have adopted fasting as a way to stay lean, energized, and mentally sharp. From Silicon Valley boardrooms to online fitness communities, the message has been clear: if you want to optimize your performance, intermittent fasting is the way to go. And for men, that often proves to be true. But there's a critical detail that's often overlooked. The vast majority of the studies supporting intermittent fasting benefits have focused on men or male lab animals. Very few included female participants. When women are excluded from the research, we get a distorted picture of what actually works for human health. What boosts hormones and preserves muscle in men could disrupt hormones and deplete energy in women. The same hormonal shifts that protect male performance may do the opposite for female physiology. So while intermittent fasting may indeed be a powerful tool for men, the science behind it is not universally applicable. The hormonal machinery is different. The evolutionary pressures were different. And when women try to mimic the same fasting routines that benefit men, the results can be unpredictable, sometimes even dangerous. In the next section, we'll explore how intermittent fasting interacts with the female hormonal system. Because when women fast, the body doesn't always interpret it as a performance enhancer. Sometimes, it sees it as a threat. And that changes everything. Women are not small men. Hormonal chaos explained. It's a phrase you may have heard from progressive health experts. Women are not small men. But when it comes to popular health trends like intermittent fasting, that simple truth is often ignored. The female body is biologically unique, designed to prioritize reproduction, protect fertility, and regulate a complex hormonal dance that shifts throughout the month. And when fasting enters the picture, that dance can be thrown wildly out of step. The core of this issue lies in the hormonal cycles that govern a woman's physiology. Unlike men, whose hormone levels stay relatively stable day to day, women operate on a monthly rhythm shaped by 4 key hormones: estrogen, progesterone, luteinizing hormone, and follicle-stimulating hormone. These hormones influence everything from metabolism to mood to body temperature and reproductive readiness. When this cycle flows smoothly, it's a sign of health and hormonal balance. But that balance is delicate, and it doesn't respond well to stress. Intermittent fasting, though marketed as a health-enhancing routine, can be interpreted by the female body as a stressor. When food intake is restricted, especially during critical phases of the menstrual cycle, the body may respond as if it's facing a famine. From an evolutionary standpoint, this reaction makes sense. If the environment signals scarcity, the female body may shut down reproductive function to avoid carrying a pregnancy during unsafe times. In men, fasting may trigger a rise in energy and drive. In women, it may trigger conservation mode, cutting back on energy, hormone production, and even ovulation. One of the earliest and most obvious signs of hormonal disruption caused by fasting in women is changes to the menstrual cycle. periods may become irregular, lighter, or disappear altogether. This condition, known as amenorrhea, can arise even in women who are not underweight. In fact, it can occur in women who are eating enough calories in total but restricting them too sharply within the day. The issue isn't always how much food is eaten, it's when and how the body interprets that pattern. A woman who skips breakfast and eats only during a narrow evening window may unknowingly send a message to her body that resources are low and reproduction must pause. Ovulation, the key event in the menstrual cycle, is also highly sensitive to nutritional signals. It requires a finely tuned interaction between estrogen and luteinizing hormone. When stress hormones rise due to fasting or other forms of caloric restriction, that signal can interrupt the hormonal surge needed for ovulation to occur. Without ovulation, fertility is compromised, and progesterone levels may remain low. Progesterone isn't just a fertility hormone, it also supports mood, sleep, and thyroid function. Disrupting it has wide-reaching effects. The thyroid, often called the master regulator of metabolism, is another system vulnerable to fasting's impact in women. While short fasts may improve insulin sensitivity or fat burning temporarily, extended fasting routines can lead to a drop in thyroid hormone production, particularly T3. This hormone is essential for maintaining energy, body temperature, and metabolic rate. When T3 levels decline, women may feel cold, tired, mentally foggy, and prone to weight gain, ironically, the opposite of what intermittent fasting is supposed to deliver. Science has begun to catch up with these clinical observations. In animal studies, female rats subjected to intermittent fasting protocols experienced a complete shutdown of reproductive hormones. While male rats in the same studies thrived, losing fat and improving muscle mass, female rats became infertile and showed elevated stress markers. In some cases, fasting triggered a cascade of hormonal signals mimicking starvation, even when calories were restored later in the day. These findings, though based on animal models, align with what many women report anecdotally, and what a handful of human studies have begun to reveal. One particular study observed women following alternate day fasting protocols. While weight loss occurred, researchers noted a measurable increase in cortisol, the stress hormone, along with decreased T3 levels and disrupted menstrual cycles in several participants. Another study found that while men showed improved insulin sensitivity, women experienced a worsening of glucose control after adopting time-restricted eating patterns. It's becoming clear that fasting affects female hormones very differently than it does in men. What boosts mental clarity and muscle tone for men might create fatigue, anxiety, and hormonal imbalances in women. And while some of these symptoms may appear subtle at first, a missed period here, a bad night's sleep there, they can compound over time, leading to more serious disruptions in reproductive health, metabolism, and overall well-being. Yet these side effects are rarely talked about in mainstream conversations about intermittent fasting. Most YouTube videos, books, and podcasts promote a one-size-fits-all approach, often citing studies that didn't even include women. This blind spot in the scientific and wellness communities has left many women confused, frustrated, and in some cases, physically harmed by following fasting routines that weren't built for them in the first place. Some women, especially those with high stress levels, low body fat, or thyroid imbalances to begin with, may be more sensitive to these effects. But even women in otherwise good health can experience hormonal chaos when intermittent fasting is introduced without accounting for the female body's unique needs. The key issue isn't that women can't fast, it's that they shouldn't fast like men do. Their biology demands a different rhythm, one that respects the hormonal fluctuations that occur week to week, and even day to day. As awareness spreads, more health professionals are beginning to caution against aggressive fasting strategies for women. Cycle syncing, gentler fasting windows, and nutrient-timed meals are becoming part of a safer approach. But the damage from one-size-fits-all advice has already been done in many cases. Too many women are still blaming themselves for fatigue, mood swings, or missing periods, without realizing that their intermittent fasting routine could be the real culprit. In the next section, we'll hear the stories of real women whose health and hormones were dramatically affected by fasting protocols that seemed to work for everyone else. Because real stories, when fasting disrupts more than hunger, it's one thing to talk about science. It's another to hear it from someone who's lived through it. For many women, the truth about intermittent fasting didn't show up in clinical studies or textbooks. It showed up in their bodies, when something just stopped feeling right. These are the voices often left out of the conversation. The women who followed all the rules, did everything right, and still ended up asking the same question: why did intermittent fasting ruin my hormones? Take the story of Erica, a 29-year-old fitness coach and social media influencer with a background in nutritional science. Like many others, she jumped on the intermittent fasting trend with the 5-2 method. 5 days of regular eating, 2 days of heavy restriction. At first, she felt incredible, leaner, sharper, more productive. But within 2 months, her menstrual cycle vanished. She brushed it off as a short-term adjustment. But when it didn't return after 6 months, she began to worry. Her energy tanked, her hair thinned, and she felt constantly cold, no matter the weather. Eventually, she was diagnosed with functional hypothalamic amenorrhea, a condition where the brain stops sending the hormonal signals required for ovulation. Doctors linked the condition directly to her fasting pattern. Even though Erica was eating enough calories over the course of the week, her body was interpreting the extended fasts as starvation. Her brain responded by shutting down non-essential functions, like fertility. Despite having a muscular, healthy-looking exterior, her internal system was waving a red flag. It took her nearly a year of consistent nourishment, stress reduction, and abandoning the fasting protocol entirely before her cycle returned. Erica's story isn't an isolated case. Many women following similar intermittent fasting routines, especially aggressive protocols like alternate day fasting or OMAD, report nearly identical experiences. They begin with optimism, driven by the promise of a leaner physique or better focus. But over time, they encounter strange symptoms: waking up at night with anxiety, irregular periods, hair loss, or an inability to recover from workouts. These issues often appear subtle at first, and because intermittent fasting is marketed as a clean lifestyle, many women blame themselves instead of the protocol. Doctors are starting to take note. Dr. Lara Briden, a naturopathic physician and author specializing in women's health, has repeatedly warned about the hormonal consequences of intermittent fasting in women, especially those under 35. She's seen patients with sudden thyroid crashes, sky-high cortisol levels, and suppressed progesterone, all following months of daily fasting windows. She emphasizes that the female endocrine system is not designed for prolonged food scarcity, particularly when the body is already dealing with stress, intense workouts, or lack of sleep. Another physician, Dr. Mindy Pelz, who advocates for female-focused fasting protocols, began noticing a trend among her patients. Women who were sticking to 16-8 or OMAD fasting schedules without paying attention to their menstrual cycles were far more likely to report symptoms of burnout, emotional instability, and infertility. In her clinical experience, these issues weren't just occasional side effects, they were common enough to consider intermittent fasting dangerous when applied without consideration for female biology. Still, not every story is a cautionary tale. Some women do thrive with intermittent fasting, but the common denominator is customization. Consider Michelle, a 42-year-old mother of two, who adopted a modified 14-10 fasting schedule only during her follicular phase, the part of the cycle when estrogen is naturally higher. She avoided fasting during the luteal phase, when the body needs more calories and progesterone support. She also ensured that her first meal broke the fast with protein, fat, and slow-digesting carbs to avoid blood sugar spikes. The result? Michelle lost belly fat, improved her sleep, and regained regular cycles after years of perimenopausal disruption. These female fasting experiences show that the difference isn't necessarily in the practice of fasting itself, it's in the context. Women who adapt their fasting windows to align with their hormonal rhythms tend to do better. Those who listen to internal cues, adjust their fasts for life phases like pregnancy, postpartum, or perimenopause, and who avoid overly long fasts during high-stress periods tend to avoid the more dangerous side effects. But that's a very different message than the blanket advice given in most intermittent fasting content. Social media is flooded with transformation stories from men who use fasting as a tool for ripped abs, higher testosterone, and mental sharpness. But far fewer women share their own intermittent fasting stories, especially when those stories end with health setbacks rather than success. There's a stigma around admitting that something considered healthy backfired. And because the science historically excluded women, many find themselves questioning their own experience instead of the protocol. This disconnect between male-centric fasting models and female biology is more than a misunderstanding. It's a gap in the wellness industry that needs to be closed. Because for every woman who makes fasting work by adapting it to her body, there are others who suffer in silence, unaware that their symptoms may be directly tied to their eating schedule. In the next section, we'll look at why this gap exists in the first place. We'll examine the science behind fasting studies, and uncover how women have been systematically left out of the research that shaped the modern fasting trend. Because understanding the problem is only part of the journey. To fix it, we have to confront the bias that built it. The science mainstream media ignored. odds if you've ever searched for scientific backing on intermittent fasting, chances are you've come across articles citing dramatic fat loss, increased longevity, improved brain function, and insulin regulation. It sounds promising, even revolutionary. But what's almost never mentioned is that most of those studies were done on men. And when women were included, the results weren't always so positive. This is the part of the story mainstream media doesn't highlight, the blind spot in intermittent fasting research that continues to affect millions of women today. The early excitement around intermittent fasting was largely based on animal studies. These studies were groundbreaking in showing how fasting improved lifespan, reduced inflammation, and even lowered the risk of chronic disease. But here's the problem. The majority of those studies were conducted on male rodents. Female rodents were often excluded because their hormonal cycles were seen as too complicated, unlikely to introduce variables. That might make statistical analysis easier, but it creates a massive problem when applying those results to half the population. This gender bias didn't stop with lab animals. Human trials on intermittent fasting followed the same trend. The earliest and most cited research involved overwhelmingly male participants. This includes clinical trials measuring fasting's effects on insulin, testosterone, muscle preservation, and fat metabolism. And while those results helped make intermittent fasting popular, they left a huge question unanswered: what does fasting actually do to women? The lack of female-centric health data in fasting research has been well documented by experts like Dr. Stacy Sims, a renowned exercise physiologist and nutrition scientist. Dr. Sims is one of the most vocal figures calling out this scientific oversight. Her now famous quote, "Women are not small men," has become a rallying cry for a more inclusive approach to health and performance science. She's pointed out repeatedly that applying male-derived fasting protocols to women not only ignores female physiology, it actively puts women at risk. Dr. Sims explains that intermittent fasting affects key hormonal pathways like the hypothalamic-pituitary-gonadal axis, which regulates reproductive hormones. When women fast for extended periods or during vulnerable phases of their menstrual cycle, that axis can become suppressed. The result isn't just skipped periods. It can include disrupted ovulation, thyroid dysfunction, and chronically elevated cortisol. These outcomes have long-term health implications far beyond weight gain or fatigue. Yet they rarely show up in mainstream articles celebrating fasting as the ultimate biohack. Dr. Mindy Pelz, a fasting expert who focuses specifically on women, has also raised alarms about how intermittent fasting has been marketed. She's worked with thousands of women, many of whom adopted the same fasting schedules that worked for their husbands or male trainers, only to end up with hormone imbalances and burnout. Her clinical observations echo what the limited research has found. Intermittent fasting affects female hormones in unpredictable ways, especially when fasting is not tailored to the woman's age, cycle, or lifestyle. When you dig into major scientific databases like PubMed or the NIH Clinical Trials Archive, the imbalance becomes obvious. Search intermittent fasting, and you'll find hundreds of results. But refine that search to include female-only studies, and the number drops dramatically. The scientific community has known for decades that female hormones fluctuate across the month and interact with stress, food, and exercise differently than male hormones do. Yet this knowledge hasn't translated into equal research representation. The gender bias in research funding is part of the problem. Historically, medical research has prioritized male physiology under the assumption that what works for men will work for women. This has proven disastrously false in multiple areas, from drug dosages to cardiac care. Intermittent fasting is now another area where the lack of sex-specific data is producing real-world consequences. Women are trying to improve their health but end up compromising it because the research guiding them doesn't reflect their biology. And it's not just researchers who are slow to change. The wellness industry and social media influencers often repeat the benefits of intermittent fasting without examining whether those benefits apply equally to women. Before and after photos flood Instagram. Fasting apps are filled with motivational slogans. But few platforms include warnings about fasting during the luteal phase, postpartum recovery, or perimenopause. Even fewer explain how estrogen and progesterone shift the body's nutritional needs week to week. This silence isn't accidental. It reflects a broader pattern in the fitness and health industry, a tendency to promote simplicity and universality, even when the human body is anything but. Complexity doesn't go viral. Nuance doesn't sell ebooks. And the female experience, with all its hormonal rhythm and fluctuation, gets pushed aside for cleaner marketing lines and one-size-fits-all advice. But the tide is beginning to turn. As more women speak out about their intermittent fasting stories, and more experts like Dr. Stacy Sims and Dr. Mindy Pelz challenge the status quo, the conversation is shifting. We're starting to question the scientific bias fasting protocols are built on. We're demanding more inclusive studies. And we're finally acknowledging that female health deserves its own data, its own strategies, and its own voice in the research. In the next section, we'll shift from the problems to the possibilities. If intermittent fasting can be risky for women when done improperly, what does it look like when it's done right? How can women adapt fasting to work with their hormones, instead of against them? The answer might not be to avoid fasting altogether, but to do it on the body's terms, not on trends built for someone else. When and how fasting can work for women. The conversation around intermittent fasting and women is often polarizing. On one side, there are enthusiastic success stories, on the other, cautionary tales of hormonal chaos. But somewhere in the middle lies a more balanced truth. Intermittent fasting can work for women, but only when it respects the female body's unique biology. The key is learning when to fast, how to fast, and most importantly, how to align it with your natural hormonal rhythms. This is where the concept of cycle syncing intermittent fasting begins to change the game. Unlike the male body, which runs on a relatively fixed 24-hour hormonal schedule, the female body operates on a monthly cycle that fluctuates across roughly 4 weeks. These changes are driven by shifting levels of estrogen and progesterone, each influencing energy levels, appetite, and metabolic response. Trying to apply a rigid, daily fasting routine to a system that evolves week by week is where many women go wrong. But with cycles syncing, fasting becomes adaptable instead of abrasive. The follicular phase, which starts on the first day of menstruation and lasts until ovulation, is often the most resilient time for women to engage in fasting. During this phase, estrogen levels begin to rise, promoting better insulin sensitivity, mental focus, and energy. It's a window where many women can safely try a moderate fasting approach, such as a 14-10 schedule, where eating is done within a 10-hour window and fasting for the remaining 14. Some may even try a gentle 16-8, but anything more aggressive should be approached cautiously. In contrast, the luteal phase, the 2 weeks after ovulation and before menstruation, is when the body needs more calories, more rest, and more stability. Progesterone rises, insulin sensitivity drops, and cortisol becomes more reactive. Fasting during this time can lead to fatigue, mood swings, disrupted sleep, and sugar cravings. Women who try to push through with extended fasts during this phase often find themselves hitting a wall. That's not weakness, that's biology calling for nourishment. For most women, the luteal phase is not the time to fast at all. A regular eating schedule, with stable blood sugar and nutrient-dense meals, will support hormonal health much more effectively. Another overlooked component of safe fasting for women is nutrient timing. What you eat to break your fast matters just as much as when you fast. Starting a meal with simple carbs or processed snacks after a long fast can spike blood sugar and trigger cravings. A balanced first meal, featuring protein, healthy fats, and complex carbohydrates, helps reset metabolism and gives the body the nutrients it was waiting for. Women who treat breaking the fast as a mindful opportunity to fuel their hormones often report fewer side effects and better energy throughout the day. Refeeding, or the act of nourishing the body after a fast, is another critical aspect of female fasting schedules. While men might go straight into a high-intensity workout after fasting, women typically benefit more from combining refeeding with recovery. A gentle workout, a nourishing meal, and stress reduction techniques like breathwork or stretching all help the body re-enter a fed state without overstimulating the nervous system. It's not about weakness, it's about restoring balance. Stress management can't be overstated in this equation. The female hormonal system is deeply responsive to stress, and intermittent fasting, if not done carefully, can become another source of pressure on the body. Women who already deal with anxiety, poor sleep, or high workloads often find that fasting amplifies those issues. For this reason, many experts recommend that women avoid fasting on high-stress days, during illness, or when sleep has been disrupted. A flexible approach that accounts for life's demands is far more sustainable than rigid discipline. Real-world examples help bring this perspective to life. Consider a woman named Layla, who was following a strict 16-8 fast daily and noticed her period started arriving late and her cravings were getting worse. After working with a hormone specialist, she shifted to a 14-10 schedule during the first half of her cycle and returned to regular eating during her luteal phase. Within 2 months, her cycle returned, her mood improved, and she no longer felt like she was fighting her body. The fasting wasn't the problem, it was the timing. Another example is Danielle, a perimenopausal woman dealing with weight gain and fatigue. Instead of forcing a prolonged fast, she implemented a simple 12-12 schedule. She fasted overnight and ate her first meal at 8 a.m., her last by 8 p.m. By keeping things consistent and predictable, her body felt safe. She lost inches from her waist and regained the energy she had been missing for years. In both cases, the women didn't abandon fasting, they customized it. Safe fasting for women is not a contradiction. It simply means listening to the signals your body sends and respecting the hormonal shifts that are built into the female experience. That means shorter fasting windows, gentler routines, and alignment with your cycle, not despite it. It also means being willing to stop fasting altogether if it begins to work against your health instead of enhancing it. Cycle syncing intermittent fasting isn't just about results. It's about sustainability. It gives women the ability to use fasting as a tool without sacrificing the hormonal foundation that supports their energy, mood, sleep, and fertility. The truth is, most women don't need extreme fasting to get results. They need strategies that reflect their physiology, not fight it. In the next section, we'll take a deeper look at the broader wellness and biohacking movement. Is it possible that the entire fasting trend has been built on a male-centric framework that leaves women behind? And if so, what does that say about how we define health, optimization, and success in the first place? The answers may surprise you. The biohacking craze, is it built for men only? Step into any modern health podcast or YouTube channel on peak performance, and you'll hear a familiar set of voices. They talk about cold plunges, red light therapy, nootropics, and of course, intermittent fasting. The world of biohacking has grown from a niche curiosity into a full-blown lifestyle movement. But look closer, and one thing becomes strikingly clear: most of the leading voices are men. And most of the advice, while well-meaning, is built on male biology. The biohacking philosophy is rooted in optimization. Do more with less. Hack your biology. Outsmart nature. But the problem arises when those hacks are treated as universal truths, not individualized tools. The concept of one-size-fits-all optimal health is seductive, especially when it promises control, efficiency, and transformation. But for women, that model often falls short, or worse, backfires. Because what helps a man burn fat, build muscle, and boost focus might destabilize a woman's hormonal rhythm, drain her energy, or suppress her reproductive function. Nowhere is this more evident than in the ongoing debate over intermittent fasting gender differences. While male biohackers often celebrate prolonged fasts and extended periods of caloric restriction, women who try to follow the same blueprint frequently find themselves struggling. Their cycles go irregular. Their sleep breaks down. Their stress tolerance drops. Yet when they speak up, their experiences are often dismissed or framed as a lack of willpower. The underlying assumption is that the protocol works, you just didn't do it right. But the truth is more complicated. Female physiology is not a flaw in the system. It's a completely different system. Women's hormones shift throughout the month, affecting everything from glucose metabolism to emotional regulation. When biohacking protocols ignore these shifts, they make mistakes that go far beyond fasting. They disrupt sleep, suppress ovulation, and elevate stress hormones, all in the name of performance. These are not harmless side effects. They are signs that the system being hacked was never built with women in mind. Some influencers have even leaned into this controversy, turning it into content. Popular podcast hosts have joked that women just need to toughen up, or that hormonal complaints are exaggerated. Others push fasting protocols that completely ignore menstrual phases, encourage women to suppress appetite, or praise weight loss at any cost. These takes may go viral, but they reflect a fundamental misunderstanding of female biology. And the pressure to conform to these standards leads many women to ignore their body's warning signs. Even women who enter the biohacking space with good intentions can get caught in the cycle. They follow the programs. They track their sleep, glucose, and ketones. They try the supplements and the morning routines. And when things don't improve, they assume they're doing something wrong. But the problem isn't effort. It's that much of the biohacking world hasn't evolved past a male-centric model of health. The metrics used to define success, low body fat, high energy output, rigid discipline, don't always align with hormonal balance, emotional resilience, or reproductive wellness. That's not to say biohacking has no place in women's health. On the contrary, women deserve access to the same science, the same tools, and the same curiosity about what makes their bodies thrive. But that access has to come with context. A woman using intermittent fasting, red light therapy, or ketogenic cycling needs to understand how her hormonal state alters the outcome. What works during 1 week of the cycle may be disastrous the next. And what works for her brother, partner, or coach may require significant adjustments to work for her. Biohacking for women is not about exclusion. It's about customization. It's about shifting the conversation from control to collaboration, listening to the body instead of trying to dominate it. And it's about making space in the wellness industry for protocols, studies, and success metrics that actually reflect the female experience. In the final section, we'll explore what this new, more inclusive path could look like. We'll look at alternatives to fasting that promote hormonal balance, nourishment, and sustainable well-being, without sacrificing results. Because the ultimate goal of any health journey isn't to mimic someone else's success. It's to build your own, on a foundation that supports who you are from the inside out. Alternatives to fasting for women's hormonal health. For women who find that intermittent fasting leads to more harm than benefit, there's good news. There are powerful, sustainable alternatives that support hormonal balance without the risks. The idea that fasting is the only path to fat loss, mental clarity, or metabolic health simply isn't true. In fact, for many women, a gentler and more hormonally supportive approach produces better results in the long run. One of the most effective alternatives to intermittent fasting is gentle carb cycling. Instead of cutting out carbohydrates entirely or delaying meals, carb cycling involves adjusting carb intake based on the body's needs throughout the menstrual cycle. During the follicular phase, when estrogen levels rise and insulin sensitivity improves, women may benefit from slightly lower carb intake. In the luteal phase, when progesterone increases and the body demands more energy, raising healthy carbohydrate consumption can stabilize mood, prevent cravings, and maintain hormonal rhythm. This approach avoids the extreme metabolic swings associated with rigid fasting and keeps the body fueled appropriately across all phases. Stress-aware calorie restriction is another hormone-friendly strategy. Rather than following a hard fasting window, women can reduce calories slightly while keeping meals consistent in timing and nutrient density. Eating regular meals with sufficient protein, healthy fats, and fiber supports blood sugar balance and reduces the chances of cortisol spikes. When stress is already high, whether from work, poor sleep, or emotional strain, piling on the added stress of fasting often backfires. A more mindful form of eating allows for fat loss and metabolic health without sending the body into survival mode. Hormone-balancing diets like the Mediterranean approach offer another excellent solution. Rich in anti-inflammatory foods, omega-3 fats, fiber, and a wide variety of nutrients, the Mediterranean diet supports long-term female health eating. It doesn't rely on calorie deprivation or meal skipping. Instead, it focuses on nutrient timing, food quality, and lifestyle integration. Studies show that women who follow this diet tend to maintain a healthy weight, experience fewer hormonal symptoms, and enjoy more stable energy levels without compromising their cycle or thyroid function. Equally important are the lifestyle habits that lower cortisol, the body's main stress hormone. Chronic stress is one of the biggest disruptors of hormonal balance. Practices such as daily movement, exposure to natural light, consistent sleep routines, and even time for joy and connection can significantly reduce cortisol levels. When cortisol is kept in check, estrogen and progesterone can perform their roles without interference. Women who prioritize stress reduction often see dramatic improvements in mood, sleep, metabolism, and menstrual regularity, even without fasting. Exercise and meal timing also play a crucial role. For women, high-intensity workouts first thing in the morning on an empty stomach may elevate cortisol too much and disrupt hormone function. Instead, a well-timed meal before or after moderate exercise provides the fuel needed to stabilize energy and protect muscle mass. Evening strength training paired with a nourishing dinner can be particularly effective for women, helping support lean muscle growth and recovery without putting the body under unnecessary strain. Ultimately, the alternatives to intermittent fasting are not about avoiding discipline or results. They're about tuning into the body's natural rhythms and creating a sustainable, flexible plan that prioritizes hormonal health. The female body responds best to nourishment, consistency, and stress-conscious strategies. And by choosing a path that respects those needs, women can thrive, without sacrificing their hormones in the process. In the final section, we'll tie everything together. It's time to reframe the way we think about health, optimization, and who the wellness world was really built for. Because the true power comes not from copying what works for others, but from learning what actually works for you. At the heart of this entire conversation is one essential truth. Intermittent fasting can be powerful, but its power doesn't lie in universal rules. It lies in personalization. For men, intermittent fasting often delivers what it promises. It can sharpen focus, lower insulin, reduce body fat, and boost testosterone. But for women, the story is different. While some do benefit, many others find themselves in a hormonal spiral, left wondering why a strategy that worked so well for their partner, brother, or coach ended up making them feel worse. That disconnect comes from a dangerous habit in the wellness world, the tendency to copy what works for him and apply it to everyone. Female physiology, with its dynamic hormonal landscape, is not a variation of the male blueprint. It's its own intricate system. And when that system is ignored, even the most celebrated health trend can become a source of stress and imbalance. The best fasting advice for women isn't a strict protocol or a time-restricted window. It's a reminder to listen to your body. Real health isn't about pushing through fatigue, ignoring missed periods, or tolerating symptoms for the sake of discipline. It's about building a relationship with your body that includes nourishment, intuition, and respect for its cycles. Science must catch up with this reality. Women deserve research that includes them, protocols that are designed for them, and experts who speak directly to their experience. But until the scientific landscape becomes more inclusive, women have to become the leaders of their own health journeys. That means asking hard questions, rejecting one-size-fits-all solutions, and embracing a personalized fasting plan that takes real biology into account. If intermittent fasting has worked for you, that's valid. If it hasn't, that's just as valid. The goal isn't to demonize the practice but to put it in the right context. The truth is that no one knows your body better than you do, not an influencer, not a podcast, and not a research study that didn't include women in the first place. Before you fast, learn how your body works. That knowledge is more powerful than any trend. It's not about willpower or weakness. It's about alignment. And once you find that alignment, your body stops fighting you, and starts working with you. That's the real definition of health.